So, we are the GHPC team, as usual. People probably used to the drill by now. It's me, Harry, the art lead. We got Josh, the project founder and lead programmer.
Yep.
And we got Blake, the tech lead. And we're here with... Which name do you want to go by in the interview?
You can call me Nils. Ssnake is probably better known because at some point I had to pick some internet name, and I wasn't sure at that point whether I would disclose my identity to the world. But that that boat has long sailed.
So we've got the famous lead developer of the famous Steel Beasts, Nils, also known as his screen name, Ssnake. So the first thing we usually ask people to start it off when we do these interviews is what's kind of a high level pitch for what your product is. And I think this one's going to be interesting because Steel Beasts sort of started as one thing and sort of became a number of things, right?
Yeah. So, since you asked me for the elevator pitch, so here it goes. Stevie's Professional is a vehicle-centric combined arms combat tactics simulation for land operations, covering the spectrum from individual crew station in an armored fighting vehicle to about reinforced battalion or battle group level. And it's primarily designed as a training tool for crew procedure training, as a tactical instruction tool at platoon to company level, and as a wargaming tool to stimulate command post exercises. And some of our customers are using it up to brigade level even. We started as a shareware game project, then sold worldwide in retail stores, and afterwards transformed into a developer for military training software. Ask me how.
Is that process something that you can go into? Is that like, is there a story behind that at all that's
of course
shareable?
There is. Yeah, okay. So first, there is a story behind everything, and yes, you're right. Not everything is shareable. I'm not entirely sure under how many NDAs I still am with respect to some of these things as part of court settlements, but yeah. So it was the early days of the internet. Really early. I started with the Mosaic browser in '93, and in '95 or so there was this game IM1A2. I don't know if any one of you ever played it.
Yeah, I played that.
And I later found out that half of the guys who were behind IM1A2 were actually the guys that were also working on microprocess M1 tank platoon. And they actually came up with the idea of setting up a user forum in the internet to get some customer feedback. So I went there, and Al Delaney, the programmer of Steelbeast at the time, was also looking for people's opinions. So he met me there, and this was before everybody's identity was concealed, so he had access to my email address and whatever, and so that's how we got in contact. And he basically said, "Hey, I'm done with my PhD. I have a year off. I figured I'd program a little bit, and I was thinking of a tank simulation. How hard can it be?" So that's how we started it off. Where I said, "Look, I'm not interested in any of the finance. I just want this game to be there, to have basically the tank simulation of my dreams." And he said, "Yeah, that's that's good because there isn't going to be any money. I thought of doing it maybe as a shareware game or something. And then we thought, and I didn't know what to expect because I'm not a developer myself. I mean, sure, I've had some ANSI C lectures at university that I had to attend, and it was horrible. I'm really not a coder. I can confess that here to the world. So I said, okay, fine. If I never have to touch a compiler and deal with these maddening error messages, then that's perfectly fine with me. But then again, since I was at the time a tank officer in the German Bundeswehr, I at least knew my Leopard 2 in and out. So I figured I could provide him with some expertise in what to do and what not to do when making a tank simulation. And at that point, we really had just the level of ambition of having a maybe tank platoon level game for M1 and Leopard 2. Because on paper, they're very similar in their capabilities. So we figured it might be fun to have both of them in there to show the difference in how the philosophy of the fire control system was, how different the user interface concepts were, stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And then it took another year, and at some point our wives planted their foot down, and I said, this is going to be out next summer or else. And we were smart enough to follow that friendly advice. So then we actually found a publisher that was willing to pick up a game that was already made, for which they didn't have to pay anything, and to sell it for us for free. And it culminated at some point in the statement, if I had known that you would insist on certain regulations in the contract, then I would have never put those regulations into the contract. I'll leave it at that. We switched publishers. And the next publisher was Strategy First from Canada, and they actually managed to bring this into retail, which in retrospect was really awesome because it meant that however little we actually made from those retail sales, at least we could bring it out to a large number of buyers, and that really was the PR boost basically that landed us then as a follow-on a deal with the Danish army. And I can go into that a little bit more later on if you're interested, but the point was then we figured out that dealing with an army was actually not very hard. We didn't know that this was because it was a Danish army. Dealing with armies is hard, just not in Denmark. And then we thought, well, if it's that easy to do business with them, then maybe we should do more of it because they're actually paying their dues, unlike the rest of the games industry. So maybe it's financially more sound to concentrate on that market.
It's kind of amazing to hear about your initial setup with publishers to kind of get the game out there, because that was very much the reality back in I don't want to insult ages or anything, but back in the day, that was kind of the way to market the game. You needed to have a publisher because now, there are so many games out there through Steam, through Epic Games Store, etc. Even our game has benefited from being independent and being able to not have a publisher to have to get on store shelves or anything like that. At the time, did you feel like, I don't know if I need a publisher. I don't know if we need a publisher. Can it just stay shareware or something like that? Or was that a kind of goal at the time to try and get signed on with a publisher?
I don't really remember, to be honest. I mean, it's almost 30 years now.
Right.
We figured that it was clear we would not make a dime if we were doing this as a shareware game. I think we were under no illusion that we could be the next Doom, and where they actually made some money with that concept, simply because it was the even earlier in the internet age, and there was a fraction of people who were willing to send in money and get those extra levels. And frankly, I mean, we also knew that whatever we were doing would never have that kind of mass market appeal. So in that sense, I mean, we looked at ourselves and said, look, we're both engineers. I mean, there's this. Al is a real engineer in electronics, and I'm what he called an imaginary engineer. So an industrial engineer, i.e. So I would focus a little bit more on the business side of things and customer relations, and then also providing the technical expertise. In any case, we figured having a publisher would rid us of the necessity to deal with mailing out copies of the game, having them produced, and all that. So it was certainly also a convenience thing. And we had the idea, the crazy idea that publishers were businesses, and businesses would be law-abiding and honest. And yeah, that turned out to be maybe a little bit naive, whatever. No hard feelings. In the end, it's not something where I think that the amount of money that we could have made if everybody had lived up to the obligations was so dramatically more that it would totally have made the difference, but maybe it would not have created an incentive for us to actually diverge our business more into the professional market.
Gotcha.
You mentioned that it was easy to deal with the Danish army, but it's tough to deal with armies in general. What are the challenges? Are they just demanding on schedules, or are the technical requirements harsher?
No, the bureaucracy, the red tape.
Yeah.
I mean, the contract that we made with the Danish army was a lean 17 pages long. And then we made other contracts with armies that had several hundred of pages. And then you get those contracts that have several hundred of pages, and each of these pages contains 3 or 4 references to laws and regulations and edicts and other papers that are not even part of the contract itself that you can look up. You would actually need to look them up, and they are in a foreign language that you don't speak. So basically, at some point, you do the leap of faith and said, come on, I'll just sign it, whatever, even though you have no idea what you're getting into.
It's interesting that each side has its own challenges, because I imagine the the feedback you get from the military customers is probably very different from the feedback you get from the game customers, right?
Yeah, it's binary. You get nearly zero feedback from military customers, which is probably one of the reasons why software that is made exclusively for military contractors usually sucks. I mean, at least as far as usability is concerned, user interfaces, etc., where your own audience as a game developer is usually very vocal about at least the user interface and certain bugs that they discover. So that's also one of the reasons why we don't really want to abandon the games market entirely, because it's an invaluable reality check to get the feedback from the personal edition users.
I've noticed the same thing. I have a background in military simulation work, and you can tell that the standards for the industry are a little bit behind the entertainment video game industry, especially in game engines, graphics, that sort of thing. It's definitely something I observed as well, where the military customers just want things to function at the end of the day, and they don't really mind if it looks outdated, and they say, okay, cool, thanks for delivering, and then you don't hear from them again.
Yeah, well, it's not quite that. I wouldn't exactly put it that way. I think that the focus is on different things, and then you also have these crazy regulation. I mean, just to name one example, I had at some point a new project manager. Armies usually assign a project manager to a product that they're using and for which they have certain maintenance agreements or where they receive regular updates or whatever. So this new project manager came in and said, oh, by the way, I have found here this list of 140 bugs that have been reported by our guys. And I said, yeah, great, send it to me. And he then said, yeah, I can't. It's classified.
Oh, man.
So this is as backwards, I mean, obviously, but those were the regulations for him. He couldn't do it. So I know that there is this list there somewhere, but compiling that list is entirely pointless from the end user's perspective, from our perspective, from his perspective. It's collecting stuff that just goes into a box and then into that Indiana Jones vault with the top men working at millions of storage boxes. And you ask yourself, why? Why are they even bothering with it?
Have you had to get people with security clearances to interact with some of the customer requirements?
I suppose we could, but we try to not get into that sphere, because as soon as you have one piece of classified information in your code, the entire code becomes classified, and then you can't do anything with it anymore. No, we definitely do not wish our customers to tell us their secrets.
Yeah. I found it impressive that you are able to get accurate depictions of the interior switchology and the gun sight reticles and things like that while maintaining the separation from classified data. Like, a lot of armies get really jumpy when you ask them for specs on their gun sights and stuff.
Maybe also attitudes have changed a little bit. I think it was also some sort of a window of opportunity at the end of the 90s, where maybe they were a bit more open about it than they might be in retrospect these days. Though I think that the boat again has sailed to a certain degree. I mean, if you're looking at how the whole thing in Ukraine is unfolding, with everybody having smartphones and people getting killed because someone needs to log into TikTok or whatever, and then the phones getting off the signals, then you have geolocation or geospecific information in the photos themselves that go and get published on Telegram and on Twitter and whatever. That's from a military perspective, I think that's very scary, and it definitely gets people killed, and many. But at the same time, the relative importance maybe of what's inside a tank is decreasing, simply because these tanks get captured by Russians, so they go inside and take photos. Other tanks get captured by the Ukrainians. They go and take photos and post them on Twitter. So, and at the end of the day, if you're looking at the interior of a tank, I'm primarily seeing a user interface that I somehow need to replicate in our software. And I'm sure you could glance some other information from it as well, although what's really critical is like the composition of the armor. You're not seeing that. The crypto chips in communications gears, there is nothing that you can glance from a photo that would provide some intelligence about it also.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, the chance of actually disclosing information that has relevance for operational security is actually not so big.
Yeah, I mean, logically that does make sense. I think we've found that in the present day, when trying to get information, it's almost reversed from what you would think. It's very easy to get information on, let's say, Soviet-designed systems, because there's so much imagery now, and people taking videos inside their tanks, looking through gun sights, taking apart ammunition and this sort of thing. But then if you ask, hey, German army, can I get some information about the Leopard? Even if it's an old variant, they'll say no. There's security rules. We can't say anything. What was it, Harry? We had to get information about the Martyr from Argentina or something.
That's the plan currently, because we can't get anything out of Germany at all. They're just completely on lockdown, and I think that's more honestly. I think what's really going on there is their MOD is just 24/7 looking at important stuff, and clearing stuff to be released to game developers just isn't on their radar. I imagine that's what's going on, more so than they're worried about someone finding out about a Martyr from 1976 or wherever that thing's from.
Well, the Martyrs are going to Ukraine, so that's also a part where OPSEC is actually becoming important again. So even if the underlying technology is literally older than I am, which is considerable, but that's certainly also playing a role.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me was we're trying to look for. I mean, we're looking for 80 stuff before they even got any armor upgrades or anything. Like, I don't think any of those exist anymore. Like, Martyr A1 or A2 or whatever. I don't think you'd even be able to find one other than in a museum these days.
You might be able to find something in the Bundesarchiv, maybe.
Yeah, that's who I was asking. And before 2022, it was pretty easy. Like, I mean, German libraries and everything are pretty open with stuff. Like, I've worked with them a fair bit doing some other history stuff. But nowadays, it's just like, yeah, everything goes through Ministry of Defense, and they just don't respond to emails anymore.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that is maybe, I wouldn't say the devil's bargain, but if you want to access to these this type of equipment, you have to provide them some value, like in our case, a training tool in return, right? So I think that's basically why we get access to all that stuff, simply because we provide a training tool in return, and they see the value of that, and they also recognize that we don't actually need to know the super secret stuff for what we are doing there or what the simulation is supposed to do, which may also bring us to your next question here. You brought up this question of trust, and there's maybe something to be said about that.
Yeah, it's I mean, for us, you'd think it would be an easy sell because we don't even want to know what do all the switches do and how does the startup procedure work. Like, we don't ask about any. We don't even ask about armor. Like, we just use best estimates from public data. We just want to know gun sight reticles and how to move the scope and assign lead and all that stuff. But even that is like, as soon as you ask anything, they say, "Oh, hold on a minute there. You can't know anything. That's not allowed."
I had a question, by the way. You're saying when you were explaining kind of the origin story of Steel Beasts, for lack of a better way to say it, that you started out, you were a Bundeswehr guy and decided that you wanted your ultimate tank sim, I suppose. I have noticed that some of the people who like our game the best, and I don't mean the best out of yours and ours. I mean, like, some of our most positive reviews are coming from people who are armor crews, and I was wondering, like, what made you, what was the process of going from someone who does that as their job? I mean, there is the stereotype of the Germans who do their job and then they finish their job and go home and play a video game about their job, and I'm not going to reference that anymore, but. I'm wondering, what kind of got you interested in software development specifically? Because I would have thought that, especially back then, there weren't really there wasn't a huge amount of promise. I guess there was Tank Platoon, but I feel like what kind of inspired you to want to make a sim out of your job, basically?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed playing M1 Tank Platoon.
Mm-hmm.
And that was even before I got into the army. And I'm not even going into the part where I have a detour of 1.5 years in the Luftwaffe. And there's a story to that as well. It's not so particularly interesting, so we'll skip that maybe. But so eventually I circled back to the tanks, and at that point the Bundeswehr had driving simulators and there was live training, and I figured that there should be a way to leverage consumer grade computing equipment for training purposes as well. I knew that I wasn't a programmer, but the moment that I met a programmer who said he wanted to make a tank simulation, I figured, well, this is probably my only chance in life to get a Leopard 2 simulation made. So I jumped on it, probably with a degree of ferocity that probably scared Al a little bit. I don't know. Because after we made contact, I basically blasted him with 2 emails daily, where I put out all the grand ideas, what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and so and at that point my English wasn't very good, so I had to sit down with a dictionary, and I wasn't good at typing either, so it took a lot of time to compose these emails, probably more time than was good for my success as a student at the university. Definitely. I mean, I flunked out of university with the last exam, actually, but I'm not complaining. It turned out to be one of those blows that fate deal you that turn out to be actually for the better. So in the end, I'm perfectly happy with where I am right now and how I got there.
It makes me take for granted the amount of scanning software and automatic translation software we have now. Like, we regularly get emails from people in China or other parts of Europe in different languages, and the only way to even respond to them is like, okay, Google Translate, what's going on here?
Yeah.
That's incredible that you were going so hard into it with Al, was it the other partner?
Yep.
Yeah, just like in the early days of the internet. That takes a lot of gumption. And so you were, at the time, it sounded like you were just really interested in making this a reality, really wanting to go forward with it.
Yeah, well, I figured at that point I had completed the training courses for a regular crew member. Rechladeschütze was the term in the Bundeswehr. That you were both a gunner and a loader. That was one job description, basically. And then I got into the officer's career course, basically, where you then had to also get a driver's license for the tank. You had to attend the tank commander's course. Then you had to attend the platoon leader's course. Then you had to attend an officer's course. And the Bundeswehr basically said whenever we train an officer, we train him to be in theory be capable to think of and give orders at the level of the battalion. So and this is a distinct difference from what other armies are doing. They're focusing maybe on the platoon and company level tactical side of it, but battalion doesn't get mentioned. And this is actually where I think it gets interesting, because only at the battalion level the combined arms part is actually starting to creep in or become such an important part that you can no longer ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that respect, I found that the tactics courses that we had at officers' school were fascinating, interesting, and actually fun. I thought that and I'm at my heart a computer gamer. I like playing games, so I also like pen and paper role playing games, but ultimately I thought, hey, there is actually something you could turn this into a good computer game if only game developers would make, for example, the commander's position useful. And that was maybe my main critique before we had actually Steelbees say you could be in the commander's place and then the AI gunner would still do whatever the hell he liked, and you had very little control over him. So I said, well, look, if you're the vehicle commander, then you're God for the crew. So you should really have control over what your tank is doing, and any solution that turns you just into a spectator that is in for the ride is pointless. Why even have a commander's position when you can do everything from the gunner's position when you're in the commander's position and the AI gunner doesn't do what you want him to do? So I was quite insistent that we would fix this kind of deficit that I saw in the not very many tank games that were out there, although there actually were quite a few. While we were still working on the very first version of Steelbees, it was no longer just M1A2 and M1 Tank Platoon, but then a number of other tank games actually entered the market. They came and went because as nice as some of these were visually looking, in my opinion, they never. I mean, Novalogic came up with a tank game as well, and that was actually a relatively big name developer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, was it Armored Fist?
Yeah, I played that one.
Yeah.
It's one that Josh cites a lot as his inspiration for GHPC.
Yeah, and in some respects, it was actually good. In others, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we then figured, okay, let's avoid certain mistakes that were made there, and let's put a different focus on what we are doing. And it's also, I mean, you try to be similar enough that people who like playing those games would pick you up, but also different enough that everybody can see, hey, this is a different take on the same subject.
Yeah, trying to innovate effectively, and that's interesting that you bring that up, because as well as the other games that were around at that time, because I would classify myself as pretty much a normie when it comes to military tank gaming and stuff like that, but I do remember a number of titles from back at that time that then just kind of dried up. Like it's basically condensed down to a niche of very arcade style gaming now, with like War Thunder, World of Tanks, stuff like that. And on the other end of that spectrum, regularly we say like gold standard is Steel Beasts because of the training doctrine that you guys are used there.
And we're not saying that just because you're here either.
No,
we regularly recommend Steel Beast to people when they're like, well, what other tank games are there out there? I say eSim made a really good product. Check it out. That's something that's a courtesy we do not extend to most other tank games, but Steel Beast qualifies.
No, I think it's very nice to also have Gunner PC out there, because ultimately, if I mean my secret mission is I wanted to make tank games a bit more popular, because I felt that there was actually some interesting stuff in it, and so and I mean, it also always filled me a little bit with regret that we didn't really have the resources and to pursue both a game line and a training line of our product. I mean, originally that was actually the plan. When you look back at what we wrote on the internet in around 2003, 2004 or something. And then we at that point, we had this contract with the Danish army, so it was clear that there would be something that we would call Steel Beast Professional. But we were also talking about Steel Beast 2 at the time. And that was then intended to be the M1 tank platoon on steroids with modern graphics and having some sort of career mode and a war diary and whatever. So these are the kinds of things that I liked about M1 tank platoon, that I figured, hey, we could actually try and replicate that in a way, and use at the same time the technology that we were developing for our professional training application. So I figured, hey, doing both should be easy. We just need to put a little bit more in content development. And again, it just shows that I didn't really know what I was talking about even then. But there you go.
Yeah, the should be easy gets brought up. Well, it got brought up a lot more for us as well in development, early on in development. Yeah, this will be easy. This will be nice. And then as we've focused more of our efforts in GHPC, with now what, 4th, 5th year of development, Josh?
Yeah, it started in earnest in 2020 because it was my personal prototype before that.
Yeah, we focused more of our efforts and our planning to be like, all right, a lot of this stuff is nice. We really want the core pieces to really flourish, though. And yeah, it's especially hard with a smaller team, which you guys, I assume, were early on.
Yeah, I mean, where do you draw the line between a small team and a not so small team?
Right, yeah.
I mean, technically, depending on how you count, we're like almost 10 people, or shortly under 20 if you count in all the part-timers and beta testers and IT support staff and so on.
That's a very similar size to ours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually leaner than I thought your group would be, considering like the technical contracts you guys have with the military. I figured you'd have liaisons with them or dedicated support, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, actually, I mean, that's part of the deal. We tell our customers we're cheap, so you don't get tech support, right? Well, I mean, they still do, but they rarely have questions. So
I see.
I mean, I also have to goad them and prod them to say, hey, wouldn't you actually think that it was a great idea to have some sort of software training, at least for those people who are developing your training content? Wouldn't it be nice? And then, yeah, okay, fine, we'll do it. So it's incredible. They spend so much money on the development, and then so little on actually providing training for those who are then supposed to use the software in a productive manner. And ultimately, I think it's not so much that they don't like spending the money. It's more they need to find the time to take people off their jobs, send them to software training, even if you do it on location. They still can't do their regular jobs. So that's certainly also an aspect. Training time is at an incredible premium, and no matter how much you're actually helping them to save once that the software is actually in use, they still see, oh, it's 3 days that I need to take this guy out of his regular duties, and that's where they get reluctant sometimes.
Yeah, I think usually on-site training is a pretty significant upsell for industry simulation stuff, just because of that, how labor-intensive it is.
Yeah. I mean, there is a very small example here. The Danish Army introduced a certain remote weapon station at some point, and they basically had to train the students to zero the sights and to to go out and on the shooting range to blink at some targets, look at where the holes are, where they were aiming at, and getting everything to actually getting the gun to shoot where you're aiming at, right? So the tools that they had, basically they had to have the entire class come in there and one student after another apply the instruments, look through the scopes, give directions for correction, whatever. And it took them about 20 minutes per person. And then they had a class of 40 guys. And it took them 3 days to just get the zeroing procedure trained to every single person. And now, with the help of our software, they can do it in a virtual environment. Everybody can do it at the same time, so you're done in 20 minutes, and that's it. So that's 3 days that you basically saved from a 14-day course that they can now apply to other training lessons, and that's then the important part.
It sounds like a good value. I imagine you hammer that point home when you're trying to convince the customers of the utility.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really had much trouble convincing people of the utility value. The bigger problem is actually convincing the generals that, yes, the company name is eSim Games, but this isn't really about gaming. It's about leveraging gaming technology for training, right?
Yeah, we got.
So that's. I mean, we originally in our main menu we had single player and multiplayer, and now we changed it to network gaming and solitaire training, or network training and solitaire training. this is why the file in our software that contains all the strings the software uses, it's called P strings because it's the strings for the professional version.
Well, that makes sense. I guess, yeah, it just does. Depending on who you're, I guess, kind of selling it to, it comes down to the branding of certain things. Games? Is this like what kids play? What are you talking about?
I was going to say we can trade names because ours is simulations and we make a game, and you have games and you make a simulation.
Yeah. And I mean, the line between, I think it's all about simulation. It's just what is the purpose of the simulation to as the underlying engine for having fun, then you're making a simulation game, or is it that you're making a simulation as an underlying engine for getting training done or delivering training? And then it's maybe a more serious simulation, whatever. But I think even then, you would really want to have some level of fun in it, simply because it helps also with the intrinsic motivation. You want the students to like doing the training and not hate it, right?
Yeah. I find it interesting how people draw that line where something does or does not qualify as a simulation. I noticed the most common thing that I've seen is that people consider an interior view to be the defining feature of a simulation. So we get a lot of feedback that Gunner Heat PC is just a game because it doesn't have interior perspective. But under the hood, it has full simulation of ballistics and armor penetration and all those things. So, like, I think it's a simulation. Maybe it's on the more game side of the spectrum, but it's still very real, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that I actually was against us adding these 3D interior views, because I figured, hey, it's just going to cost us a lot of time and effort to do it, and the actual value of it for training is not that great. That was my thinking of it, and I figured that we would get that the players would love it because it adds with the immersion, and that our military customers would actually say, we don't really need that. Turned out that the military actually was a big fan of this, because it then also allowed them to produce videos that would show certain instruments in the tanks, or that they could use this to explain to the students, to the very beginner level of crew training, what are the instruments, where are they, what do you do with them. So in that sense, it actually was something where the instructors benefited maybe more than the students. But okay, fine. At that point I stopped arguing against making these 3D interiors. But they do consume a considerable amount of resources in making them.
Yeah, I think that's probably a major part of why we have not made any for our game. We've always talked about, yeah, it would be really cool to have interiors. Like, we can't deny we're military nerds and we like tanks. It's just, the amount of resources you have on hand as a small company, and you have to be very careful where you apply them. And we did the calculations and said, okay, we can completely halt any progress on this early access game to get these interiors in. Would that be worth it? Probably not right now.
Yeah, economy of effort is very important when you're a small company. And in my opinion, actually, I always liked working on a constrained budget because it forces you to think very hard about the design choices that you make. And I felt that you're actually better off when you're really forced to make decisions rather than say, oh, I can do both.
That's probably true, yeah.
Oh yeah, it spurs creativity. And then you can really focus on the things that matter, I feel.
That was a kind of doubly so in the very early days of the project. I mean, I don't like talking about this too much length because the game is so evolved from where it used to be. But when it was just my personal project, I just had to spend my free time on it and my spare cash and everything because it was a side thing. I still had a job. I was still like a simulation programmer during the day. So everything that I did was extremely lean and focused, and I could never mess around too much or I would lose the plot. And I made such fast progress, and it was so laser focused in those days. I miss it sometimes, but it's just the reality of working with a team, and you have to coordinate and talk to each other, and you can never be one guy making all the decisions anymore. But still, like throughout the early phases of the project, we had that same thing where we had such limited resources. We just had to say, okay, make a decision, stick with it, and then pick the best thing to work on at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really hold you back now. I agree.
No, it's definitely much better now. But I actually liked hearing about how you started the project because the parallels were there, like having a good experience with existing stuff, but wanting something better, having an idea in your head of what the perfect tank simulation would be, and then giving up your time and your something about your personal station to make sure that it happened. I mean, for me, it wasn't as dramatic as dropping out of school, but I did end up quitting my job. That there's always, it feels like if you're that focused and that inspired, you are going to be willing to give up something to make the dream happen, and that's the consistent thing. And I actually think I like what you said about seeing more tank games arise. I think that we continue this almost a tradition of enjoying something that much and wanting to bring up a new iteration of it and make something great. I think your game, your simulation, is part of the earlier generation of that. Maybe GHPC is a new one, and then there will be more in the future. People who played Steel Beast, played GHPC, will say, you know what, let's make a new tank game, and then it'll continue.
Yeah, I mean, we're all basically dwarves standing on the shoulder of giants, if you will. I mean, it's an old trope, but really, I don't think that Steel Beast would exist without M1 Tank Platoon. M1 Tank Platoon wouldn't exist without Steve Jobs popularizing and Bill Gates to popularize home computing. It would not exist if there hadn't been industrialists that actually developed transistors and making PCs a concept. Personal computing. I mean, that was I was born a year before Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, so I have no recollections of the actual moon landing, even though technically I was already alive at that point, but a year old. Nope, don't remember anything. I grew up in a childhood that was completely devoid of computers. Computers were something out of science fiction films and novels, and that was it, right? And then I had my first exposure to a ZX Spectrum in my early teens, and at that point, I think it very quickly became clear that I wanted to do something with computer, or at least that I knew that I liked computer gaming. And then, but maybe it wasn't so much the thought that, hey, I could program this stuff myself, even though that is actually the inspiration for a lot of people of my age that actually went into the computing world. I definitely lean more on the user side of things, but still, I think we've handed an incredible opportunity from the mid '80s to the late '90s. These 15 years were really incredible in everything that happened there. I mean, the internet from the mid '90s on, up to that point, it was about being isolated with your computer. From that moment on, you actually had the idea, well, we can actually network computers, we can do things together. I mean, at university, we set up, we for ourselves, we pioneered setting up a home LAN. At that point, it wasn't even something as simple as just put that Ethernet cable into the router and you're done with it. I mean, at that point, there were no switches, there were no routers, or at least they were so expensive that you couldn't do it. So we actually drilled holes in the walls to put in coaxial cables and T pieces and terminator resistors and whatever, all that crap that we went through just so we could play Doom. But then there was Doom, and man, how glorious was it, right?
As part of your phenomenal. I just wanted to circle back as part of, I guess, your professional additions, the value that you guys added for military contracts and things like that. I think I remember reading on your site that there's also like hardware components to that in some cases for like training classrooms, things like that. Does that kind of harken back to some of the stuff that you had to do just to get like, oh, I had to do all this just to get Doom running, and then now you're like, now I have to do all of this to make very closed systems for training for these military setups?
Yeah, actually, there is one thing, and that was control handles.
Yeah.
So we were contacted by the Danish army, and they said, hey, we actually need a training solution for the Leopard 1. And I told Al, hey, we got to do this because every army that in the year 2002 or 2003 it was, that is still using the Leopard 1 has proven that they have absolutely no money whatsoever. So,
hey man,
so these guys are our training or core audience. These are the perfect guys to do it, because if we do it for them, we can do it for Greece, we can do it for Belgium, we can do it for whoever, Italy, whoever is using Leopard 1, can do it for Australia. So we really need to win this contract there, and they were actually contacting us. So I mean that was so much easier. That there weren't even internet portals at the time for public tenders or whatever. This is how do you actually make a contract with an army when the army doesn't know that you exist and you don't know whom to talk to it with the army, right? These days with emails it's all easy, but back then nobody had email addresses except for nerds. So and then they gave us a description of how we would actually drive to their location. This was a time when GPS satellites were in space, but there was no consumer grade equipment that you could actually use the satellites for navigation. So you get this description and drive 200 kilometers that direction, make a left turn. Then the third road, make a turn to the right and whatever, and then you're driving there in the middle of the night with a lot of rain, and you just pray, let's not miss that turn there, because then we are fucked. So that was, and we arrived with wet film cameras, and you bombed up with like how many film cartridges you could afford to buy in the store. I mean, I started this with cameras that I borrowed from friends and said, can I use your camera to I have this photo opportunity, but I don't have a camera. Then I go and say, 3 film rolls, that'll be plenty, right? What was I thinking? Okay, so then I learned, well, you need to go there at least with 10 film rolls or 15 or 20 or whatever. But and then having the film developed, scanning that in to. Okay,
so
fine.
many steps, so many pieces to the
Yep.
process that are not as automated as we have now. Yeah.
So fine. Then we actually have this contract. We deliver on the contract. They're happy, and at some point you get a phone call and say, "Oh, we actually have a problem there," because I mean, okay. So first I came here and said, "You Danes are crazy. This is never going to work. You can't train a tank crew with using mouse and keyboard." And I said, and then they said, "Yeah, come and look." We took this handle from the tank. Some of our guys soldered a conversion tool. Now we can plug it into the game port of a computer, and then Windows XP popped up. I have detected a 2-button or 4-button to access joystick. Shall we calibrate?
That is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then at that moment I said, "All right, I'll take everything back. You actually can train people with our software, so let's make it happen."
Oh wow.
But then they realized that each of these handles that they took from the tank was, I think, booked at a value of $18,000 or something like that.
Oh my god.
That's some premium gamer gear, man.
Yep. And then obviously some bean counter from Army headquarters stepped in there and said, "Guys, what are you doing here?" And they said, "Well, it's fine. We can always disconnect the handles and put them back into the tank if a war is going to be on. So what's the problem?"
Oh my god.
And he said, "No way. This can't happen." So at that point, they said, "We would like to buy more licenses, but we can't because we have the maximum number of control handles in use, and the army won't allow us to mount any more from the tanks." And then I had to find a company that would actually make control handles, and it turned out that there was and this is why it was so important that we had Steelbees in retail, because tank fans all over the world bought this game and they loved it. And so there was this British bloke who said, "Yeah, look, I'm a supporting member of the British Tank Museum, and I have just sold my company that was making tools for the cigarette industry, and I'm looking for something else to do, and I have a workshop." And I said, "Great, control handles, make control handle replicas, right?" So that was how eSim was born, and they then sold these control handles still at a hefty price tag from a consumer perspective, but at a considerable savings from the perspective of original tank equipment, because they did not have to be working from minus 40 degrees to plus 70 degrees in condensing humidity and whatever with analog parts. Now you could actually make a digital game controller connected to the control handle at room temperature with maybe zero tolerance for dust and whatever, but at least you could get the shape of it right. You could have the same resistance of the spring resistance, etc. So at that point, you have ticked all the boxes that are important for a replica in a desktop trainer. And that was then the point where we said, "Oh, thank God, dear God, thank you for sending me this guy from Britain who just wanted to be somehow part of it, and who is now making these control handle replicas, because that now allows me to sell more software licenses."
Oh, wow.
That's really cool to hear. We've seen eSim because people ask us, "Hey, is there a controller that you can play GHPC with that's like the real tank?" And I mean, I've thought to myself it would be really cool to have an Abrams style, Cadillac grip to play the sim with. But then we look at the options, and it's basically just a vSim. and we look at the price and we say, oh boy, I don't know if the gamers are gonna go for that one right now, but maybe someday.
Yeah. And these are the cheap guys. And I mean, I'm looking at the from an industrial engineer's perspective. I'm looking at the figures, the number of handles that they can sell. These are really the rock bottom prices.
Oh yeah.
That they need to charge in order to get all the machinery paying off, to have the workshop to pay themselves a minimum salary. It's not like they're getting super rich from all this. The market is very, very small. You can sell maybe a couple of dozen of these control handles to armies, but certainly and then they also looked at, well, what do I do with injection molding and plastic, and can we do it cheap in China? And yes, you can if you buy 40,000 copies of them, but you're never going to sell those 40,000 copies. So and the break even point is, I think, 20,000 copies. So up to 20,000 copies, you're better off milling them out of the raw aluminum, and only after that it becomes more feasible to say, okay, now I'm moving on to plastic. So terrible.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I don't think that they're gouging or anything. It's more that I know our audience is more casual, and they're spoiled by console game controllers and consumer grade flight sticks and all this stuff, and so it would be a very steep ask if we say, yeah, we recommend playing this game with these controllers, and here's the price. They know it would never fly.
No.
Asking us, do you work for eSim or?
Yeah.
No, I just also mention it because sometimes people get very strange ideas, like turnover equals profit and similar concepts that are floating in the minds of some people.
Yeah. It's
I mean, when you're running a business, it's like you have the faucet on full blast and the water is coming in, and that's the money that you're getting. But then it also goes into the drain right away, and there is this tiny little bit of water that is accumulating for a temporary moment in the sink, and that is your profit, and everything else is it's like blasting it right into the drain, and
It frustrates me when people look at, like, you can sort of guess the number of sales a game has on Steam by looking at the number of reviews and so on. They look at the price, they look at the sales, and they say, okay, Radiant Simulations has all this money, they can afford to do better. And then that's, I'm looking at the actual books, and we're spending everything we bring in. We are not rich. It's a very balanced 1-to-1 budget, and if we could do more, we would. It's just a different reality. Plus, we don't even get all the money. Valve takes their cut. There's taxes. It's a whole different story.
We're very well kept in ramen noodles. Let's keep it at that.
I admit that I've made progress beyond ramen noodles, but
oh man, you got 30 years in this though. Like, that's the
Scrooge
dream.
McDuck over here, man.
Maybe one day we'll be there.
And I'm planning to retire when I'm 70, but not before. So
I really enjoy that you've tread the same ground or similar ground beforehand, and you can give these stories and insights. It's kind of a cool thing that there's still this enthusiasm and people are pursuing this idea. I hope that one day we're in the same position where we're well established and someone else is taking up that pursuit. I had a point I was going for with this, but I forgot what it was.
Nice.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're tired of it. You want to... That's enough 10 games. We don't need to produce it.
I really enjoy what I gave up a stable career to do this, and I do not regret it ever. Like, this is the dream. I would do it again, for sure.
Better than work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for real.
On the topic of control grips, this is probably like the only time we're going to be able to talk about this with anyone. But I've kind of wondered in the past if it might be, I feel like in the future, maybe the budget option is going to be like a printable kit for a set of control grips. If people could use like a Hall sensor or something, like I've seen some custom control yokes for flight sims and stuff, and it seems like you should be able to do that with a Cadillac grip.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a concept that has a merit to it, and I think at some point it will emerge. How and who is going to do it, when it's going to be done, it could be any moment, it could be another 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that is probably what's ahead of us with respect to control handles.
Yeah.
I remember what I was going to say. Sorry, it took me a second. When we first put our demo out, I saw a thread come up on the Steel Beasts forum about it, and you personally, Nils, were very gracious about the existence of Gunner Heat PC. You said something like, I wish them luck, and that maybe they would have had a place on the eSim team with that interest or something. Just like very positive comments. And that, I mean, I knew just from seeing that you were a kindred spirit. You care about making a good tank game, and you are an enthusiast, and you're not one for rivalry and that sort of thing. So that, I mean, from that day, you had my respect for sure. That I really like that spirit and understanding that developers of Sims, we really are all just nerds who want to make a cool thing, and seeing that that parallel thinking and that bravado.
Maybe I'm better at hiding my rivalry.
Maybe so, but you did a very good job then.
There is certainly a little bit of that. I mean, I'm aware that I'm talking to a potential competitor here, but then I think that there's also the bigger picture. First of all, thinking that we're competing against each other is maybe true on the first order of thinking, but then anyone in the entertainment industry is competing with anyone else in the entertainment industry for the limited time budget that every person has that they can devote to entertainment. So we're actually competing with Hollywood. We're competing with Coldplay and whatever music band there is out there that people like. So in that sense, I think saying that you just look at one tank game versus another tank game is not really the focus here. The focus is more like, can we actually grow the market share of tank games in the entire space of entertainment industry and computer games, and that is then maybe the kind of tide that lifts everybody.
Definitely.
I've seen it happen.
So that's more my take on this. Sure, as if you were to actually walk onto my turf and say, no, we're going to make training solutions, then I might become a bit more reluctant in the interactions or so, but we're not there yet. So
yeah, I've seen it happen. Sorry, just real quick.
No, go ahead.
I've seen it. Like, I don't think it's just idealism. I think it's actually real too. I've seen people get into our game and say, you know what, I've decided I really like tanks. Like, I want to look more into this. And then in the process of looking into tanks and tank sims, they will inevitably find Steel Beasts, and a lot of people will get Steel Beasts as a result. So it's kind of each project might be a gateway into the broader enthusiast sphere, and we sort of help each other out in that way.
yeah, and I think I suppose it's also this kind of transition that might happen between War Thunder and Gunner Heat PC, that people who may become a little bit tired of. I mean, the fact that there is even a thing like a verb, or a concept like grind
Yes.
indicates that maybe this isn't actually the best game design possible. I think something like grind should never be part of a concept of a good game, but that's just me.
Oh yeah, you're speaking to me now. That's
And so I figured that people who might actually develop some sort of an interest in the topic, but then get tired of the mechanics, but they might then move on to Gunnery PC. Just like if someone tells me, look, I'm interested in tanks, but Steel Beast is too much like work, or it's not as entertaining as I thought, I would, without hesitation, say, well, check out Gunnery PC then instead, because I think there is always the room for this sim light type of games that were so prevalent in the 90s that you had. I mean, if you think of all the microprose titles, they weren't simulations; they were simulation games, and they were primarily designed by game designers, and they had as much entertainment in their minds as it was trying to be somewhat accurate about the simulation side of it. But I think they were happily sacrificing simulation for fun.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And I mean that is maybe then also the difference between the approaches. If I wanted to make a game focused Steel Beast, then I would say be educational as long as it doesn't stand in the way of having fun. While if you're making a training application, then have fun while it doesn't stand in the way of learning lessons.
Yes,
Definitely.
So and that dichotomy has always been my my guiding design principle in most of the decisions that we are making. We could do it either this way or that way. I'm always looking at, well, from the training perspective, doing it in the fun way, does it take away anything? If not, then let's do it. But if it does, then with regrets, the fun has to go, and we have to focus a little bit more on the realism there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the consummate game designer sort of philosophy, right? You're trying to blend a kind of fun in such a way where it's problems or tasks that you want people to learn and be able to work out, but you want them to have entertainment while doing it, so they come back and continue doing it, or they say good things about it later and they spread it around to friends. So it's like at the base level, yeah, it's still game design, but you're trying to set it up as this needs to solve real world problems with real world training.
Yeah, and we very clearly land on different parts of that spectrum, the blend between game and simulation and realism and all that stuff. But I enjoy that people can choose their flavor, that they both exist, and you can pick one, you can do both. I think we say on our website that we're not trying to replace or kill any other tank game. We think that people who enjoy tank games will enjoy ours as well. And so it's kind of like, why not try both? You know, there's no need to choose.
It's an interesting thing, you know, because like sometimes it doesn't come up all the time, but sometimes you'll see, like in our community, for example, there's like, I think in both of our communities, there's a lot more rivalry between the players of the game than there is between us at all. Because people have this idea in their head that they've got the best taste, and it's a personal affront to them that something else might exist.
Atari versus Amiga, PC versus Mac.
Yeah, it's a bit of that, right? And sometimes you'll see some stuff in there where people just have completely the wrong idea as well. Like once in a while, we'll get someone will say something like, "Oh, I was thinking of trying Steel Beast. It's so expensive though," and it's like, well, that kind of used to be the case, but it's pretty affordable these days. Like you can jump in and try it for like what, $10 or something. It's like, with the live license, and sometimes I think it's just there's certain conceptions of how it works that are just false. Like the other one that you sometimes see is people say it's like, oh, it's too in depth and the learning curve is too high, and like I don't know, if I haven't played Steel Beasts since 2017 or something. That was back when I was working on Squad. I was playing Steel Beast because I really wanted to try and push for the mechanics in the tanks to be a little bit more interesting, which is actually how I started, like found Gunner Heat PC and started working on it, because I wanted to improve that stuff that was going on. But I remember I booted it up the other day, and I don't know, if you can play Gunner Heat PC, you can find your way around in Steel Beast. Like the fire controls and stuff, like they are based on the same real thing, and they kind of like the principles are the same, right? And I feel
Sure.
like any person who's decent at playing Gunner Heat PC could jump into Steel Beast and actually, like, they could shoot things and they could hit, and the thing to learn would be all the more tactical level stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think there is two aspects there. It's the sheer number of different fire control systems that have accumulated in Steel Beast over time. I mean, we were the first ones to include infantry fighting vehicles in there, and if you look at, say, a CV9035, that is a god-awful complicated fire control system, and we're still in the process of fixing the last bugs. So
this is all the air bursting and stuff, right?
Yep. So hopefully this year we'll get a bug fix out there that will finally correct those last remaining issues. And then there is the other aspect of, and that is, I think, the much harder training step, stepping up from a single vehicle to platoon to company level and to coordinate dismounted infantry or mounted infantry and tanks and artillery observer and air defense and engineers. We're doing a lot of work in the engineers department lately. So those are the kind of things that you could say take away some of the fun if you just want to have quick action game with tank guns blazing. Then engineers really take the fun out of this, because all of a sudden you have these minefields, there is a river and you need to get across it, and the bridge is blown, and so it's this kind of wading in molasses to get the tanks to where they actually can have the guns blazing again. But at the same time, this is like multi-dimensional chess in a way, that you have all these different elements. That's why we're talking about combined arms, that also make it a challenge to not only get the right unit to do the right thing, but also to do them in a synchronized fashion so that they're mutually supporting. And that is a very complex task, and there is not really much of a surprise that by the time that you get to be a battalion commander, you probably have spent 15 to 20 years in an army and learned everything from crew position to command position in between. And you're not just dealing with chess pieces, you're dealing with people, and then with people also come people problems that need to be solved on the way, right? So in a way, I could say that army life has spoiled me for any kind of normal job, because there is so much variety in all that. And Steel Beast is kind of my methadone program for no longer being able to ride with the tanks. But at least I get other people who never go into the army the chance to have a glimpse at the complexity of everything behind that, and that's also a nice thought.
Mm-hmm. You said in an earlier interview several years back that you made Steel Beast to be the tank sim you always wanted, and then in a kind of perverse twist of fate, you became too busy working on it to actually play it. Is that still the case?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean, I still get some time to do it, mostly when you're beta testing and you're trying to find new bugs and report them. But ultimately, I'm mostly busy with maintaining contact with our customers to figure out, well, what is the next thing that they need? How do we solve a certain problem in an ongoing contract or whatever? So that certainly is an aspect that is necessary in order to keep the company working. And if the company doesn't work, then there's not going to be a product and not going to be any income. So it's necessary to do all that.
So what you're saying is,
I mean, the idea that you can play games all day is maybe a kid's concept of how the world works, but
yeah.
real life is different. So you got to respect that. It's just the way it is.
So what you're saying is, to finally play your game, you'll have to destroy the company that you've created.
No, maybe I would just need to retire or something. I mean, that would certainly be an aspect, and then I probably would think, well, I spent the last 40 years on this, so maybe I should do something else with the remaining years that I have. I don't know. I'm zero regrets here. I like what I'm doing. It's would I like to play a little bit more and not think about the bugs in it? Yes, but at the same time, it's probably also just not possible, realistically speaking. I mean, when I went to platoon leaders course, you get trained to look for locations where you want to place your tanks, and you think about, well, this would be a good defensive positions. If I had to go on an offensive, then how would I do it here and there? And then once that you have this kind of training every day for a while, you drive home from the army barracks, and your view is wandering a little bit from while you're driving on the autobahn, and you look at, oh, over there is a position, and there, and here I would scan for. So it or you start thinking about adding certain environmental elements to your world, like railings on highways, and then there are certain reasons why you would or would not want to do that, because it's going to be somewhat resource intensive if you do it in the wrong way. And then all that you do is suddenly is looking at power lines, at railings, at intersections, traffic lights, etc., all the street furniture that you take for granted when you just walk around in a city. And then you start thinking in every minute that you look at it, you can't help yourself. You think of it, well, if we wanted to have that kind of object everywhere in our maps, and we have to do it in a procedural way, because there is no way that a human would actually place all these objects manually in a map. That's crazy. Then how would we have to do it? What kind of rules does it follow? What kind of data do we need in order to implement a procedure that could place all these traffic signs in the right locations, etc.? It's just a natural consequence whenever you dig a little bit deeper into a certain problem, that I could imagine that it was the same thing for Benoit Mandelbrot when he discovered the fractals. As soon as he discovered the mathematics behind it, then you start seeing the fractals everywhere.
Yeah.
And you, but he had to actually develop a mathematical concept, and then you could say, okay, now that I understand that part of mathematics, now I can actually see how it's here and there and everywhere. And so it's a back and forth between you think about a problem, you solve a problem. Now that you have solved the problem, you discover other things that you weren't even aware of before, and that shapes your thinking and your perception of the world.
Yeah, it's actually really intense how much it consumes you if you're invested so much. I mean, we're in a fortunate position that we are not working on somebody else's dream or working for a company that tells us what to do. Like, we are product owners, and so when you're thinking about how do I make this the best it can be, and you're on your off time, but you happen to see something or something pops into your head, you almost can't help yourself. You think about it. How do I work this in? What can I do with this idea? I'll catch Harry posting, interesting facts that he found digging through military documents, and I know he's not on work hours at the time. I know he's supposed to be, going and doing something on his weekend, but he's posting some interesting photograph and saying, look, we could do this, and I bet I could make a shader that does this. And it's just you almost can't help yourself. You have to turn it off on purpose, or else you'll just always be thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the remote work concept, that is also there is a certain danger to that you're burning out yourself without noticing it. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's also difficult for your coworkers, and if you have something like bosses or different hierarchy levels, then how do you spot that someone is burning himself out when you're not seeing him in person, right? That is certainly also a challenge, and I haven't fully figured it out in every aspect, but I know that at least for myself, I've found a comfortable balance that works, and I would like to believe that everybody else who is working on the team has also found that balance.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. We had to learn very quickly. I mean, I used to work a 9-to-5 job, regular business hours. I know, Blake, you did as well. Harry, you were already on remote some of the time, right? So it maybe wasn't quite as much.
Yeah, I did a lot of freelancing for overseas companies, so it's kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of used to doing things at funny hours sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I was teaching a little bit too, and that was all normal. It's honestly, it's more of a, if I switch to normal hours, it's a little bit weirder for me because it's different to what I'm used to.
At this point, we're used to it, but we've had to learn very quickly how to run a business, how to manage subcontractors, how to be good teammates to each other, how to be good managers. And I never asked for any of this. I just wanted a cool tank game to exist, but it comes with the territory.
Yeah. I mean, like the funny hours. I mean, Al was in California, so there was a 9-hour time difference between me and him. And as a consequence, since then I've basically I do work until maybe 2 a.m. in the morning, and then I go to sleep and I wake up. I do a couple of hours in the morning, and then I regularly sleep 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, and then I get up again. So that's the kind of shift in life patterns that occurs just because you're having people in different time zones, and that you need to coordinate somehow.
Blake, that sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yep. It's certainly an interesting life that we've chosen for ourselves, but I wouldn't trade it. I think it's very exciting in its own way, and there are challenges, but I think we're lucky enough to be with people who understand and can adapt, and yeah, I'm along for the ride. I like it.
Yeah, it's let us meet a lot of interesting folks with great skill sets and learn a lot from them at the same time. So, like, it's been very cool overall.
We're coming up on, I want to say we're past an hour and a half now of actual interview. Do we have any final thoughts or ideas we want to put out there?
I got one question. All right, Nils. Since you've noted that you're a PC gamer at heart, what games do you play now, if any, not related to Steel Beasts, when you do have some downtime? Is there anything recently that's caught your eye?
I keep coming back to Civilization.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's scary how many hours I've sunk into this. I've tried recently Stray, which was very nice.
That was the cat game,
Yep.
right? Yeah. I've played that.
So
My wife really enjoys it.
entirely different in concept, but I liked it. But then my arm hurt and I had to stop for a while to play. So I've been the last 3-4 weeks without computer game time actually. But at least the arm is no longer hurting. So there's that.
Yeah, that's good.
I liked Cyberpunk 2077 very much. Now that all the bugs are fixed, and I actually have immense respect for the developers that they followed on for so long to fix bugs after bugs and actually introducing new features on the way. Well after I assume the main peak of sales has long been past them.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is something. That there are things to like and some things not to like about it. Some of the more scripted missions are great. Others are not so much. But you never. I understand how certain things turn out to be from a developer's perspective. You never see the full picture as the end user, what was going on, what kind of compromises had to be made in order to get a certain thing done at all. So yeah, I think that's probably the part that has shifted my perception of computer games a bit. When you know how the sausage is made, that you then also start to appreciate, well, that actually must have been a lot of work to get it done, and they did it in a way that performs well, and you have a high frame rate and whatever. Well, that's actually pretty awesome that they did it this way. So yeah.
I find it very hard to be critical of other developers, even if I disagree with their creative ideas or something. When I look at anybody who's actually making something and putting it out there for the world, and I have some level of appreciation for that. Like, as now that I'm in that same game myself, yeah, it's hard to criticize too harshly if someone's actually doing the work.
I mean, maybe this is also tending a little bit about the kind of parties that I have, but I found that Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes is a great party game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, it's these tiny things that are going in the background, like the beeping, the noise, the little rumble, the flickering light. It's not really much, but they use it in a very effective way to create a tense atmosphere. If we're talking about minimalism in game design, then Fights in Tight Places is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Just having these with these tiny animations, giving a character to all the goons that you're fighting there. Just a little gesture here and there, and then being able to do everything that they do with maybe 16 colors or something and shades of gray. That was some very unique thinking from the artwork part that I actually appreciate very much.
All right.
I got a good question to close it out on. What is your dream addition to Steel Beasts? Like, what's something that you've wanted to put in the game but never could, or something stopped you from being able to?
We're developing, I think that's no secret, a completely new game architecture, almost from ground up, maybe not entirely. And I hope that this is then going to allow me to do certain things that we will never be able to do justice. And just to name one example is the amount of dust and smoke on the battlefield that lingers on, that is persistent. The amount of obscuration that you have when there is artillery, when someone activates a smoke generator. If you just think or watch these videos from that Kazakhstan television station Ana, I think they had embedded reporters during the Syrian civil war like 10, 12 years ago. And when you then see how a T-72 activates a smoke generator in an urban environment, and how it completely obscures for minutes and maybe 15, 20 minutes or so an entire road, because there is very little wind between the buildings, etc., then you get some sort of an appreciation of the amount of dust and smoke that you would need to have in order to convey a realistic impression of how it would look like, but you can't do it for performance reasons because you would then have so many particles flying around that it's just killing the frame rate. So I hope that with the new architecture we can do a little bit better there, though how far we'll get, I have no idea. But that kind of battlefield obscuration would be one very simple example of a visual thing that I would like to see that up to this point we just can't do because there is not enough computing resources, at least with the inefficiencies of the current SteelBeast 4 engine.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think that's a pretty one of the things that everyone wants to do if they're interested in this stuff is the dirty battlefield. I think like it's a big thing for us as well, like wanting to get that right, and it is like it's a kind of a never-ending battle. I think to try and balance it against performance and all this kind of thing, it's hellish.
Yeah. Overdraw.
But I mean, you can get around certain things like instancing helps a lot. If you're doing it in a clever way, then you can have actually a very large number of objects cluttering the landscape, but still every single one of those is a little drain on the computing power that you have available, and it's not like you're bleeding from 1,000 paper cut. You're bleeding from literally a billion paper cuts. So
yeah.
It's always an ongoing balancing act for sure. For every gain you make in visual, you lose a little in performance, and you have to claw it back, and it just never ends. It's part of the game.
Yeah. And then we have these customers who who tell us, well, we would actually like SteelBeast to scale up to division level. Yeah,
we hear very similar things.
Yeah. Well, we've got a long road to go on that too, but
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.